Hey, what's up, everyone? So, this is Alex here. We're going to be covering the 56th opening today, which is called Ralle or Rally. Not exactly too sure how to pronounce this, but this was named after Paul Ralle of France. He is definitely one of the more experienced players from France, and he's played through the earlier years of I think between the year 2000 all the way up to 2006. I've seen some of his games is really impressive, but this opening is something that I would probably not recommend beginners or if you're just learning the game or if you're just a mid-range player. Even for myself, I wouldn't really dare to use this too often because it's quite challenging to actually use it. So let's take a look at this opening sequence. So this opening starts off as a white player. If you wanted to perform a uncommon variation, this would be it. So it might surprise your opponent, limit options for black, but it's counterintuitive for black, but it's also hard to follow up and it gives up a little bit of advantage. So let's take a look at the sequence. F5, D6, the standard rows, you go to C5, F4. So leading up to the standard rows, E3, you go to C6, and of course, this is assuming your opponent doesn't make any variation here and plays the standard approach towards rows by playing d3. And instead of picking up the usual f6 that is probably expected by most players playing rows, you play the Ralle opening by playing kind of like a staircase looking shape over here by playing f3. So that is exactly the full sequence where it's kind of triggered, where this is an official named opening right after Paul Ralle, one of the French legends in terms of Othello. Um, so over here, definitely quite an interesting nestled shape over here as part of a staircase. So probably one of the disadvantages that you kind of give up your advantage almost too immediately, kind of, but you allow your opponent to kind of jump in straight into the center. It's more likely that your opponent play e6 correctly than considering other moves such as g4 or g5, unless they wanted to do a variation. So over here, if black were to jump right into e6, the best move over here for you to naturally follow up is to just simply kind of, even though you're flipping two discs in two different directions, you're just kind of clamping and just forming up the standard shape against rows for white. So when you play f6, then black would either follow up with a natural d7 or potentially to g4 or g5. So g4 being the recommended best, this is the natural sequence to go to. And over here, as white, if you were to play the g3, typically the sequence that would follow might be g3, g5 for black to jump in. You go for something like h5, and then black jumps in h4, and then you take the h by h3. That could be a typical sequence, which is the standard book sequence. So this is fairly easy for you to play at the moment, but towards the back end, it tends to be a little tricky as well. So if black were to choose to play in the standard book sequence, it might be easy, but if black chooses to vary it, it's extremely difficult to play for white. And of course, since it's very straightforward for black right now, this would be quite a straightforward sequence. And of course, black up to here, I think d7 and f2 are still fairly easy moves to kind of follow up. So after black goes here, again, white is kind of like just crossing back to just capture the edge potentially as a natural sequence. Um, Another way is to play a quiet move against the entire row or column of this that black just created over here. So let's just for argument's sake that we choose the same type of approach that how white approached to the right edge and to approach to the left as well. So assuming if black were to jump in over here, you would then go towards trying to capture the edge. So this kind of move is, not very intuitive given that it's flipping three discs and exposed to two different squares, and you probably wouldn't want to allow black to just jump into such pockets of spaces over here. So I would say that as white, this is a very edge dominant opening. So you have to be really confident with your control of the edge and at the same time control of such key access of diagonals. So it's quite an interesting opening, but I wouldn't really recommend, if you're just looking for something simple to play, this is probably not your best choice against a rose player who is playing, as black. So let's take a look at the other sequence over here. If we were to say go to d2, which is natural, to just kind of sweep up this to the side, black jumps in fairly easily. It becomes very challenging for you to try to pick up a move like f2 to kind of wrap around your opponent's discs. Unless you are very edge play dominated, you are just wrapping around and going for the edges, the boundaries. So in general, I think it's fairly easy for black to follow up. Assuming we played this one of the recommended best moves upon further analysis or further reading of the game by the software, this in itself is uh, an unnatural move to play to begin with for white because you probably wouldn't want to give up maybe such a move to black, and then you would still need to find one more move to kind of just jump out, and you tend to kind of self poison yourself as well if black just takes this simply. So it doesn't really make sense, pretty much at all to just follow in this sequence. So over here, you allow black to kind of nestle himself as well. So it's very counterintuitive. I would say that it's a special opening. If you feel that this is something, these are moves that you can pick up, then of course, by all means, go ahead. Otherwise, I would highly recommend that, only expert players pick up this opening with a very deep understanding of this book. For myself, I think it's fairly challenging to play, definitely. And you give black some options to vary over here, but even though it's counterintuitive towards the back for black, but the starting part is fairly easy, I guess, for black. So yeah, that's essentially the Ralle opening, and I hope you enjoy this opening video, and you can consider this, if you wanted to play. I think this is fairly uncommon online, so if you wanted to play something different, why not give it a shot? And let me know what you think. So thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye.